And it has been great working with our board, even though Jim McLean is an attorney. There you go. But my heart is truly filled with thanks tonight for many reasons. My wife, Annette, is energized by a lot of things, but certainly nothing more than her 8 trips to Israel, study tours, her heart for things Israeli, things Jewish. And she was down at the hospital, as were other participants from Friends of Israel, in the south of Israel, this past March when the rockets were coming in from Gaza, some of which landed in the distance and were seen by our participants in that volunteer service program at Kaplan Medical Center. So she was undaunted, but she will tell you that she was well trained for that, teaching 44 and a half years in the city of Philadelphia. So, another thing about Annette, we were at Josh and Andy Friedman's home for a break the fast, and you know, it's going on in the evening like it is now. And I said, you know, we better get going, Annette, because we have an hour's drive. And she said, okay. An hour later, she's still saying goodbye. And Mike Fine, I remember Mike standing over here. I remember the comment well. Don't know whether you do or not, but Mike said, Annette is taking the 1-hour Jewish goodbye to new lengths. But we've had a great time with all of you. So thankful for my other family members here, daughter Suzanne, her husband Dennis, for my son David, Curry, his wife was to be with him tonight, and the babysitter on the way to their home to sit their children was involved in an accident, a hit-and-run accident. And so she bowed out, and Curry couldn't make it. For Annette's sister Pat and her husband Jim, and for our longtime friend of 22 or 23 years, I believe it's been, Rosalind. Rosalind Lewis has been kind of a adopted grandmother to our children. Our children now are grown children, but certainly that and more to us. So I appreciate all of you. Friends of Israel's leadership team is scattered throughout here tonight. And I'm so glad for all of you, certainly first and foremost for Jim Showers, who's been a colleague, a buddy, a confidant, everything to me for the past 10 years. And the rest of those in the leadership team, as you have worked real hard in a real capable way to make Friends of Israel twice voted one of the best Christian workplaces in America. That's this leadership. Our board of capable leaders. You've heard from Jim tonight. Other board members are here from various locations, always keeping us on track and focused, and making sure that the Friends of Israel does not morph into something else that God didn't intend. Here we are. Next year is the 75th anniversary of the Friends of Israel. Many organizations 50, 60, 70 years down the line, they morph into something else that God never intended, in my opinion. And the Friends of Israel board, keeping us away from the latest trendy theologies so that we are not shaken, we are not swayed by those theologies which exclude Israel. Because Israel is a heartbeat of God's Word. And for all of our Jewish friends here tonight, everyone, every one of you, I have a story with. I really do. You may not realize it, but I do. And I'm just so thankful to you. You've blessed us as Christians. You have opened doors for us. You have encouraged us in every way. You know, 25 years ago, when I came to Friends of Israel, there was so much I just had no idea of. I did not understand the history of Christian anti-Semitism, the persecution, the violence, the convert or die, the cross as not only a symbol of violence to Jewish people, but many times an instrument of violence to Jewish people. I didn't get it. I didn't know it. I didn't know about passion plays as occasions in Europe for people to leave and be violent against their Jewish neighbors. I didn't know these things. I didn't know about the Martin Luther syndrome. But I came to serve at Friends of Israel. I thought I was coming to give, when in fact I personally have received so much more than I know I've given. Almost embarrassed by some of your comments tonight, and I don't feel I deserve it all or anything like it, but what an advantage I had to plug into an organization when I got here to Friends of Israel that was 50 years on the scene already. 50 years of heritage, 50 years of Bible-believing Christians who back in 1938, 10 years before the modern state of Israel was reborn, 10 years before that, they understood in a biblical sense God's promises to Israel and the Jewish people. They understood that Israel was a huge biblical issue. They also understood there would be a literal, physical state of Israel again someday. Seemed impossible at the time, but 10 years later, it certainly happened. Well, some of the things that are happening between Christians and Jews make us all realize there is a huge sea of change underway today. I think back to the Margate Jewish Community Center a couple of years ago. It was an Independence Day celebration. There down the main street of Margate, New Jersey. And sorry, Pastor Ron, but Annette and I played hooky that Sunday morning.
I know you did.
Yeah, we were down there. We were down there marching with the Jewish community, marching down Main Street. And then it was started 11 a.m., noon, 12:30, quarter of 1. Some other people showed up with signs high in the air. Christians support Israel. They got out of church. They grabbed their signs. They hurried over to be part of what was going on there in Margate. How do we explain that? Cherry Hill Jewish Community Center, the Second Lebanon War. Hundreds of evangelical Christians showed up. The place was packed that night in support of Israel. Mostly Jewish, of course, but there were also hundreds of Christians. And it was so encouraging to me to see them waving their flags of Israel, actually violently, in support of the Jewish state. The Baptist Church across from the Jewish Community Center. Its annual dramas on themes from the Hebrew Scriptures, from the Tanakh. And Director Barbara Sharp is here tonight. So many of our Jewish friends know Barbara because of the plays. The sign out front of the church at Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah to our Jewish friends. The rural church, the church in rural Virginia with a huge flag of Israel. I remember when I was first asked to speak there, and I came in the side door, and I looked, and the biggest thing in the church by far is this humongous flag of the state of Israel. Oh, by the way, that's Pastor Jim Logan. I said, Jim, what are you thinking of with this? And Jim said, I figure it this way, that if the God who takes care of Israel, if we honor him and his state, he'll take care of our church too. Brothers of Israel, thank God for Christians programs. Unbelievable. We so appreciate that, our friends at Brothers of Israel. Church in Tucson, Arizona. problems. We have a source of strength that is greater than the enemies of God's promised nation and the enemies of God's ancient people. We have the God of the Bible. We have the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We have the God of the Jewish people, and we stand with him as our great hope going forward. Thank you very much. I appreciate you.